Every morning while I sip my coffee, yesterday's meeting notes are being summarized. My linear stand-up is already written, and I didn't touch any of it. Here's how I set that up using Claude Cowork's new feature, Schedule Tasks, and how you can do it too. Let me show you. So what are scheduled tasks? Scheduled tasks are just tasks you can create in Claude Cowork that run on a timer, like hourly, daily, weekly tasks, which are great for anything you do every day in the morning, for example, or weekly, like reporting, things like that. And it's very flexible just because you can use any of the features that Cowork uses, like MCPs, and connectors and skills and all that, right? There's only one caveat, which I think is important, is that it only runs when your computer is on, so you can't let it run overnight. Maybe that will change down the line, but right now that's where we stand. So to create one of these yourself, you need to go into the Cowork tab. This is the Claude desktop app. It's only on desktop, as far as I know, not in web. And then you go to scheduled, and here you see 3 scheduled tasks that I have already set up. But we're just gonna make a new one, something very simple like hello world. So what you'll do, you'll give it a name, something expressive. This will be a description, so something like say hello world, right? So a short version of the prompt itself, most likely. And then you can say hello world. Again, this is very simple just to show you how it works. And then you can pick a model, something cheap, default, or you're probably familiar with the models, so Opus or Sonnet. And what's interesting is you can give it a folder, which means it can, for example, create files in that folder, or it can read files. So if you have context that you want to be used within the process itself, it's best to just give it access to the folder. And then you can say something like, from the current folder, read, strategy documents or reflection documents or whatever, and then use that for the task, so you can inject some context, right? And then here you can say, okay, this runs manually, hourly, daily, weekdays, weekly. So, pretty simple, self-explanatory. And what we can do is we can create this, very simple task. Here it will show up over here, or I don't remember which one. I feel like they have the same config now, but doesn't matter. So you go in here and then you can revisit the instructions. You can edit some of it. So if for example, you notice that it's not doing something properly, you can easily go in here, you can change it again. And you can also, just to test what it does, you can run it manually, right? So it will go and do that. And of course you can see what it's actually doing by opening this. So they save this as a skill file, which basically just your prompt gets turned into a skill. I have a separate video on also how to create your own skills, so you can check that out if you want. But yeah, very, very straightforward. And I think the real magic, so to speak, happens here when you actually use MCPs or you use extra context. So, and I'm going to just show you 2 examples of that. So here's a simple prompt that just gives me an overview of what has been done and worked on yesterday and what we're working on today. Obviously, this is not a very good prompt, but it's good enough, to do what I asked for. And how that looks is essentially it goes in and it uses the skill file again, but then also uses MCPs to fetch issues from linear, and then it create a report for me. And of course this is just inline, but essentially I could ask it to create a Word document. I could ask it to do, a markdown report, or I could ask it even to create an event in the calendar or add a document to, a calendar event for the week, like the call itself, right? So for daily stand-up or something like that. But yeah, so this is just something I do manually every day anyway. Like I look at, okay, where do we stand? Where are the tasks at? What's going on? What's in progress? All that kind of stuff. So I think very useful. Again, it runs at 9. So while I sip my coffee, just wait for it to run. And when it's done, I think will also send you a notification if you have the iOS app when it's done. So that's another great way. If you're not on your computer before, you'll get notification. And then, I also have something more interesting here, where essentially I'm looking at the Granola transcript. So I use Granola for call recordings. And then I look at transcripts from the last day And then it should create a markdown document in the transcripts folder. So within this, and this is the local context, so I gave it access to this folder, which creates kind of our knowledge base, right? And then I say, okay, create in the transcripts folder, within this folder, create a new file with key takeaways and action items. Do not create two files for the same call. So it should check first, like, is this been done already? Just in case it runs, too many times. And then I also say, okay, make sure you load the right context from the local folder based on what project we're talking about. So essentially it should understand from the context of the transcript what project this is for. And then it should select the context. So within this folder docs, I have folders with the names of the projects, and those contain, the strategy, the positioning, the vision, whatever, like the roadmap, just more information that will help it to evaluate the transcript in a smarter way, which, for example, Granola doesn't have, right? So Granola also creates summaries for you, or it creates these key takeaways, but it only cannot take what has been said within Granola, what was said in calls, and often it's missing crucial context, which I can inject here, right? So just by default gives me a much better result. And then I have this other MCP, it's called Context OS. That's my own MCP, which has, I think, 150 different system prompts or tools that I want to run. And some of that are lenses, which are essentially certain viewpoints, like the lean startup lens, or the stoic lens, which is like evaluating what is being said from a certain angle. So essentially the lean startup lens would challenge what we're saying. And if it hears that in the transcript, we're basically being too, over engineering, or we're doing something that under the lean startup isn't, done properly, it would challenge me and say, hey, here, you need to watch out. It sounds like you're trying to spend, a month on a feature that isn't properly validated. And it knows that because it has all the context, so it knows where we stand, and it has the call, so it has the new information, and then it has certain viewpoint. Those are the three things needed to do an evaluation, right? And meanwhile, it's dark mode here. So you see here how that looks like. And it said, okay, I found 9 meetings this week. I'm going to fetch the last day. So it ran a bunch of commands here, and then it wrote one markdown file for each. And what's nice is now I can go in here, and normally what's very important, I move over to Notion. And so I can go in here and say, like, hey, let's move these to Notion or whatever, right? Because they're just open in a normal Cowork chat. So I can then go in and I can post-process whatever I want. Obviously, if I do always the same thing, I might as well add it to the workflow, right? Or to the task itself, to the prompt. But maybe I don't always want to do it. Maybe it's, for example, say, okay, so this is not important. It's kind of ephemeral. It's not interesting. And then maybe I just want this and I want to skip the rest, right? So now you can think about, can you encode that into the prompt as well? You can say, okay, let it reason itself what's like strategic value, and that will then be moved into Notion. It should be smart enough to do that. I might get it wrong sometimes, but that's how you can basically at first start very small. You start with a small workflow. You let the workflow run, then you go in and you say, okay, so now I always do this thing, or now I always make this decision. How do I add that to the prompt so that the next time I don't do it? And so you can automate more and more and more while you learn, okay, what the results look like, and if you're happy with them. So you can iterate step by step, and then at some point you have to do nothing anymore because Cowork is doing all your work, and AGI is here. No. All right. That being said, if any of this stuff sounds interesting to you, feel free to subscribe below, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.